You're listening to the Modern Vital podcast, which explores the relationship between environmental factors and human health. Here is your host, Dr. Ben Reebs, founder of Portland Clinic of Natural Health and Modern Vital, elevating health and well-being one journey at a time. Stay tuned for fun, practical, and thought-provoking health tips, along with suggestions and insights into optimizing health and preventing chronic disease through integrative, naturopathic, and functional medicine approaches. Your body is unique, powerful, and intelligent. Your treatment should be too.
So on today's episode of the Modern Vital podcast, we're going to discuss how our relationship to food might impact our health. And today's special expert guest is Ian Rubin, a wellness coach, a coach educator, founder of Whole Self Wellness LLC, and CEO of Food Story Coaching, and that's also a website, foodstorycoaching.com, as well as adjunct professor at National University of Natural Medicine, my alma mater, and a great university. And as a coach, Ian offers Food Story Coaching, his proprietary approach to food coaching developed over the last 16 years. And his approach is driven by his passionate interest in food culture and the intersection of personal, social, and psycho-spiritual, as well as anthropological forces that influence our daily food choices. Welcome to the show, Ian.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Ben.
It's so great to have you. And feel free to call me Ben.
Well, after all that honorifics that you just gave me and made me sound so good, I felt like I should at least, throw back a little bit.
Thank you so much. Well, we were just chatting a minute ago, and I know we've had several conversations. Yeah. We know so much about how food can make us sick. I mean, there's documentaries. We have entire curricula designed on it, or based on it, and thousands of studies. We also have lots of different diets that are science-based. Yeah. However, we so infrequently talk about our relationship to food and how that might impact our health as well, and how that might play a role in the environmental effect of food. Yeah. So what exactly is Food Story Coaching?
Well, let me start by explaining, thank you for that setup. Let me start by explaining what Food Story a little bit more is, and then happy to unpack Food Story Coaching. So you mentioned the idea that we don't talk about our relationship with food enough. We don't appreciate its value. So when I say relationship with food, sometimes I'll use that interchangeably with food story. But think about your relationship with food, all the thoughts, all the feelings, all the wants, needs, desires, all your behaviors around food. Those are all being driven by your food story, that deeply internal, personal, psychospiritual, emotional, but also that story is being influenced by external forces, family, friends, and culture. So while I use them interchangeably, it's also true that our relationship with food comes from our food story. And one of the ways that I've illustrated this that I think really works for people is this quaint little story. So you think about what you were saying about how we know about nutrition in every single way. So you can imagine your perfect meal. Like if you could write up a plan for a client to eat a perfect meal, and I just use the example of like wild caught salmon, you went to the farmer's market, you got broccoli, okay, whatever. And you've made it all, and you sit down to eat, and the phone is ringing, the TV's on, the dog's barking, the kids are screaming. You're kind of not really noticing that you're eating it. You're maybe even hovering over the seat because you're getting ready to leave to go to the next thing. Maybe you're chewing, maybe you're not, because you don't really remember the meal, but it was gone in about 12 or so minutes, and then you're on to the next thing. But it was the perfect biochemical, macronutrient balanced meal. You contrast that with the kids are with a sitter, your phones are on vibrate, or they're in the car, you're hanging in with friends, or maybe just with your partner, and you order a steak, fried asparagus, and a baked potato with everything on it. Not what your nutritionist or naturopath would think of as being the ideal nutrient-dense meal. Maybe you have wine, maybe you have iced tea, whatever. You're sipping, you're talking, you're hanging out with your friends or with your partner. You're laughing, you're having a great time. Time is just flowing along. And that first bite of whatever it is that you got, well, again, we'll use our steak example, it's just sublime. It's just like out of this world. You're like, you've got to taste this, your partner, your friend, you got to try this, oh, you got to try my thing. And you're eating stuff you wouldn't normally eat, and it's just delicious, and you're just having a great time, and it's wonderful. Okay, which of those meals was healthier? begs the question, and it begs a redefinition of what's healthy. So that's what food relationship is all about. You could have one meal, be stressed and unhappy, and as I like to joke, shooting on yourself, saying, oh, I should be eating this or I shouldn't be eating that. And that meal, macronutrient density and where it was purchased and free range and organic and all those great things, might actually not do your body a whole lot of benefit because you're in a distressed, right, overly sympathetic state. And the story that you're telling yourself while you're eating it isn't, this is wonderful and delicious and joyous and nourishing. It's stress and worry and anxiety. And then again, the flip side, the other meal, wonderful environment, fun, relaxed, decompressed, right? All those wonderful things. Well, maybe that food might actually do you some benefit, or at least it'll do you maybe less damage if it's really not the best food that you ought to be eating that's best for your body. Because at least you were in a great mental and emotional state when you ate it.
Right.
So this kind of encompasses the idea of food story. And what's happening for most people is they're making choices unconsciously out of their food story. They're not choosing what's right for them or best for them in terms of health and wellness because their story is telling them, yeah, but don't do that, do this instead, for whatever 101 reasons. And for most people, if they're not aware of their relationship with food, if they're not aware of this food story, then they're making their choices. And then afterwards, they get into the guilt, shame, blame. I could have, what I should have done different. Why am I so lazy? I'm so stupid. I know I wasn't going to feel good when I ate that. That may be true. But why you made that choice had very little to do with rational thought or good for me or not good for me. It had to do with the needs of our story, that deep psychospiritual, emotional, cultural component of our lives that says, do this because this is the right thing to do in the moment. Consequences are a whole nother story. So food story coaching is this approach that invites clients to open up and think about and get in touch with and talk to me about, well, what does that have to do with your relationship with food? Or how does that fit into your relationship with food? Or why is that important to your relationship with food? So we can get that piece unpacked so that your wonderful plan that you've built for them, that the nutritionist has designed for them, we can actually get the two pieces in a little bit closer alignment, and they might actually implement the changes that their practitioners want them to implement.
Wow, that's so refreshing and so powerful. It's like the other side of the coin that we really are missing, and I see patients all the time on low FODMAPs diets, on GAPS diets, on paleo diets, on keto diets, Mediterranean diets, whatever you want to call it, and a lot of them aren't better necessarily. They maybe in some cases they're worse. They're coming to me. They're trying to figure out, what to do. This could be one of the missing links, right?
I have a friend right now who just went to her first naturopath, graduate of our program. And I don't mean to speak ill of our program or even to speak ill of a practitioner. This is a common problem across all disciplines. The naturopath did all of her diagnostics, ran all of her tests, and gave her a program. And she dumped this just insane amount of information on my friend and gave her a diet that was super restricted, put her on basically the elimination diet. My friend is texting me and emailing me frantic, what am I supposed to eat? All of my favorite foods are gone. I don't understand what these foods are. I don't cook. And she's miserable. Miserable. She's stressed. She's unhappy. She says, I'm not going to do what the doctor wants. I'm not going to get healthy. I'm going to get worse. I don't know how I'm going to follow this plan. What's wrong with me? Why can't I suck it up and do it? And I said, no, that's not you. That's on the practitioner. Because unfortunately, the industry, nutritionists, naturopaths, especially, but other practitioners as well, personal trainers, etc., have been misinformed, in my opinion. I'm trying to be humble, misinformed in their approach, which is if I just fire hose my client with all this data and explain to them why gluten's bad or why they need to drink more water and scare them and freak them out and explain to them how great they're going to feel if only they make these changes, that somehow magically, if I transfer that knowledge into their brain from my brain, that it's going to magically translate into action and get them the results that they want. And that's just ass backwards. It misunderstands the fundamentals of what it means to be human, being a psychospiritual, emotional creature, not rational. And it misunderstands the power and importance that food plays in our lives, that making changes to your diet have very little to do with understanding that something's good for me or bad for me. It has all to do with the deeper story and all of our deeper connections and attachments and meaning that we place on food.
Wow, that's big stuff. So one of the things I see, I mean, obviously IgG food sensitivity testing has been popular for probably 10 years or more. And, functional medicine doctors run it, naturopathic doctors run it, holistic medicine doctors run it, even the long COVID clinics run it now. And a lot of times what I see is that they come back positive for a person's favorite foods. And, knowing a little bit about immunology, I know that, if I eat a lot of cheese and potato and gluten, I'm more likely to have IgG antibodies to these foods that end up passing my blood or my gut barrier and ending up in my blood. And then they end up on these tests. And so the doctor says, take out gluten, take out cheese, take out potato, take out soy, let's throw in egg, let's take out oats, let's take out broccoli, how about some cashews? Oh, those are all your favorite foods. I'm sorry. And then they give these people this plan and they try it for a while and they generally get better for 2 or 3 weeks before they just go into utter misery and depression. And then they come to me and they don't know what to do. Correlation doesn't mean causation. Just because antibodies are showing up to foods in my blood doesn't mean that those foods are actually what's causing my problems. Leaky gut in and of itself is not a root cause. It's a symptom of something deeper. Anyway, reflecting that back to you, how does one unpack their food story instead of this?
Well, they both have to be done at the same time. I've had food sensitivities, and my wife has food sensitivities. I've worked with clients with food sensitivities. The issue is not, do you have food sensitivities or don't you, and do they not correlate with relationship with food or food story? The key is that when you, to use your example, oh, I'm taking away all your favorite foods. Well, first of all, the doctor better be smart enough to know that, well, maybe part of the reason why these all show up is that they are your favorite foods and you eat them all the time. That being said, it could be that some of these foods are part of what's causing you problems. Here's where the food story coach steps in. I'd like to have a conversation with you about the possibility of limiting or eliminating some of these foods, at least in the short term, to see what type of effect, if any, that elimination might have for you. Are you open to that conversation? Well, what do you mean? Well, there's this thing called the elimination diet. What we typically do is we take out all the foods that we think might be causing problems. And we see if you get better. Oh, okay. Well, in the old days, I might just do that and tell you, here's what you're going to do. You're going to take these 8 foods out of your diet. Nowadays, I worked with my friend Rubin, and he talked about food story, and I have to realize that these foods are important to you for more than just nutrition. And I don't want to just yank all your favorite foods out of your life and make you miserable, even if it makes you feel healthier. So where's the dance? Where can we come to an agreement on both of these factors, that these foods, while they're important, might be part of the problem, and that maybe eliminating them in the short run might give us some information about, is this in fact a food that you should be eating less of or more of? Oh, okay. Now the client's thinking, okay, this person's not yanking away all my foods. They're explaining to me that my foods might be part of the problem. They said might have to eliminate. They talked about short-term changes. They're asking me for what am I ready, willing, and able to do. Okay, now I'm open. The client is now open to a conversation of, all right, well, how long do you think it's going to take for me to notice a difference? 2 to 3 weeks. So you're saying I shouldn't eat these foods for 2 to 3 weeks. Ideally, that's what we would do. We would shoot for 3 weeks and see how you're doing. Okay, I can tell you right now, I can do that for these 4 foods, but these other 4 foods, I don't know what I would replace them with and eat instead. Okay, fair enough. Here's what I'm thinking. Those 4 foods that you've mentioned that you could take out, I think that's great. Those are the 4 big ones for me. These other 4 are important, but not as critical. So why don't we agree? You're going to work on those 4 foods. Now, all of a sudden, the client and the doctor are on, they're in congruence, they've agreed to something. What do you know that client's likelihood of sticking to that program and their program adherence has just gone through the roof in likelihood. But if you do the old school, which is just go do this because I said it's good for you, yeah, within 3 weeks, they're going to be miserable because you've messed their entire relationship with food up. It doesn't matter if they physically feel better. You've traded physical well-being for emotional not well-being, for emotional misery around the fact that I can't eat any of the foods that I like. Great, I feel better. My rash is gone. My bloating is gone. Great. Yeah, but I don't eat anything I like anymore. My life is miserable because I can't eat anything I like anymore. So it's not one or the other. It has to be finding a way of blending this. And more what I've been hearing from other wellness practitioners that I work with and teach them food story coaching is, boy, why didn't they teach me this? Why is this not mainstream in the educational system? Why are the internships and mentorships and residency programs not leaning heavy on this psychospiritual, emotional coaching relationship with food piece? And I'm like, I don't know, but those who have incorporated this into their work, and again, this is a humble brag, have transformed their practice. They work less, they work easier, their clients come back, their clients stay, their clients refer, because they're actually getting the success that they're looking for, because the client and the doctor are working together, the nutritionist and the client are working together, and understanding that dietary change is more than just eat this, don't eat that, this is good for you, this is bad for you. They recognize, no, it's all rooted in their story. And then the conversation about the science and what's best and what's not so good is a conversation that the client is more ready, willing, and able to have, because it's not separate from their personal lived experience of what it means to eat that food or not eat that food.
So like if somebody has celiac disease and they obviously can't have gluten at all, and let's say that it's a huge part of their culture, which probably it is, and let's say they're new to it, where they're not quite sold on it yet, and literally it's like it's killing them, so to speak. How does one incorporate, and I know it's an extreme example, but bringing food story coaching into that? How would
It's a great example. It's a great example. So I talk about this a lot, where we're trying to bridge MNT and with food story coaching. And how do we do both? Because you as a doctor have a due diligence and responsibility to tell the client, you're celiac. If you're eating anything with wheat and gluten in it, it's not just like going to be kind of not a big deal. It's really bad for you. You got cirrhosis of the liver, you eat these foods, you could end up dead. Like you do this, you could end up in, ketoacidosis, you could end up in a coma, like diabetics. Like you have to be real with these people. That being said, if you attach that to, therefore you never can eat sugar, you can't ever have gluten, you can't ever eat dairy, if you ever eat this, it's going to kill you. Well, you're doomed. Forget it. Because the client's like, well, if my life is over anyways, I might as well go and enjoy myself and eat what I like. But if you say to them, I have to do my due diligence and explain to you the difficulties and the strategies and the risk factors that you're under. That being said, we're on the same page. You get how important this issue is for you. Okay. How do you feel about the idea of having to give up wheat forever? No doctor asks that question. They just assume in their head, like, hey, I told you it's better for you, so you should be ready, willing, and able to go and do this. Nobody says, how do you feel about the idea that I'm telling you that you have to give up wheat if you want to be healthy? Client starts crying, they get angry, they're disappointed, they're despondent, and you're like, yep, that's pretty much what I would expect you to feel. Let's talk about that. Now the client actually feels heard and seen and valued and respected, and that they're not crazy, that they feel completely topsy-turvy over the fact that you've just taken out their staple food or their favorite foods. You've actually met them where they're at as a human and said, yeah, again, this is going to be really, really hard for you. Let's talk about it. And you talk about it, and then you say, how do we bridge the gap of these two realities? This food is terrible for you. It could kill you. And you are devastated over the thought of having to give it up. Both are true. Okay, how do we work with this reality? But what's been happening for most of the people is there's no food story coaching reality ever acknowledged. It's just, well, but this is better for you, so why wouldn't you do it? What's wrong with you? Oh, you're a difficult client. Oh, you're non-compliant. I don't want to work with you. Go find somebody else to work with. And the pattern repeats. So you might not be able to tell the client, yes, you can still eat this food that you love so much. It doesn't fit into your life, but we better talk about, well, what does that mean for you? So the client can have the grief, they can have the sadness, they can have the depression, they can run through, the grief cycle of, I have to give up my favorite food because it's killing me, literally. And or come to the conclusion of, well, I'm not going to give that food up. It's too important in my life. So what are we going to do instead? And you as the doctor have to say, we'll do the best we can. If you won't give that up, I can't promise that you're going to get better. But here's what I can say is avoid all of these other foods and take these supplements and drink this and don't do this. And we'll see how you do. Because ultimately, that's your choice as the patient. The patient has the right to say, I'm not going to do what you tell me. But they need to know both sides of the coin to be able to make decent decisions.
Yeah, what you're saying is super inspiring and amazing. And it really speaks to the responsibility that we have, as naturopathic doctors, as alternative wellness practitioners. We have a huge responsibility, not to cause further trauma or damage, it's hard to put into words, but you know what I mean? This is big stuff, right? How do we do that? This is huge.
Yeah, and I think, the whole idea of do no harm, is your first rule. But what happens there is in the medical field, whether it's naturopathic medicine or functional medicine or naturopathic medicine, it's thought of as a biological issue. We don't take into consideration psychospiritual and emotional, energetic issues, trauma. We don't take into consideration ACE issues, right? Adverse childhood experiences. We're like, well, but this is what's good for your physical body. Yeah, but what's good for my spirit? Well, you shouldn't be eating it because it's bad for your body. I understand that, but this is what makes me happy. Oh, well, I don't know. That's not my job. The problem is then they throw it over to the therapy side, but most people don't need food therapy. They're not eating disorder. They're not having body dysmorphia. They're just like a normal human being, in my opinion, which is, oh, I have an emotional attachment to food. Duh, I'm a human. But doctors are just taught, nutritionists, personal trainers are just taught to ignore that component of a person's life. So do no harm means first things first, show up as a human and recognize you're sitting across from another human, and that humans are not rational animals. We are emotional, and we are irrational most of the time. And that food is a totally an emotional component of our lives. It's not rational, it's totally emotional. And if you don't meet someone there, yeah, you're automatically doing harm. So, I work at the university. I'm trying to get this into the curriculum more, sort of fundamental as best I can. But, and I work with people outside who've graduated. I work with wellness professionals all over the place who are adding this to their business model and to their doctoring and nutritionist, model. So it's getting out there, and there's other people who do similar work to what I do. So it is a conversation out there about we got to do more than what we're doing. But yeah, so we need some institutional change. We need curriculum change. We need changes in the way that older doctors understand the process, so they're not continuing to reinforce old style training with the newest graduates. And then graduates need people like you, they need people like me and others to mentor with, to internship, to do residencies, to work for, to get continuing ed, etc., so that they realize, oh, there's way more to being a good nutritionist, naturopath, functional medicine doctor than just labs and programs and protocols. I actually have to remember that I'm working with a human being who may be irrational and emotional and have psychological, and energetic sort of things going on that I have to address as part of my work, and I can't just treat them as a purely biological system.
Right. Well, Ian, this has been great. Where can people find you online?
So foodstorycoaching.com is the best place. Those coaches and nutritionists and naturopaths who have trained with me will be listed there as well. I'm building up a bit of a little cadre of nutritionists and naturopaths who have done food story coach training. So they are fully versed in the food story coaching model. So they bring that to their practice, which is pretty amazing. So whether it's a naturopath or a nutritionist, to know that you can go to someone who totally gets the science and knows all about the best protocols, but also has this other side of really understanding what it means to work with the human and help them change their relationship with food. I'm very excited that people are interested in doing that type of work with me. So that's probably your best place to find me.
Well, Ian, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
That concludes today's episode of the Modern Vital Podcast. We'd love to hear from you. We value your feedback. And if you have any questions or suggestions, please reach out to me at ben@modernvital.com. Also, please leave us a review on Spotify or Apple if you enjoyed this episode. And then, we look forward to having you join us next week for another episode of the Modern Vital Podcast.